Have you ever wanted to quit something? I remember the day I wanted to quit. I was 19 days into a 2-month journey of walking from Atlanta, Georgia to Washington, D.C. on foot to bring attention to poverty in this country. And there was this lady walking behind me, and she asked me this question that literally gave me the fuel to continue to march forward. She asked, "Why are you doing this?" And I can only think about the lady that knocked on Love Young Wall's headquarters door. She was 64 years old, and she said, I haven't eaten in a week. We weren't particularly doing anything that day, but I stuck my head around the corner, and I say, "How did you get here?" She says, "I walked." I say, "Well, allow us to take you back to your home and get you some groceries on the way." We plugged the data into our GPS, found out that she walked 7 miles. And I asked the question that I want to make public today to myself. I said, what in the world are we doing as a country where elderly people are living on less than $100 at the end of the month and having to walk 7 miles just to survive? I wanted to do something. I wanted to walk a long enough distance where I could elevate stories over stats, because we all know the stats, right? But sometimes we just don't know how the stats flesh out in individual stories. We don't know that the homeless man was just put out of a shelter or denied water because he had a stench. We don't know the mom who has to walk and endure 2 miles of a journey just to find diapers for a child. Did you know it takes courage to be poor? And I was walking through heat and through rain and through snow, not snow, but really it was that heavy of a walk. And each day the burden got more and more gruesome as I marched toward the White House in Washington. I remember my feet being swollen many days and my knees starting to swell with inflammation. And all I could think about was the faces of all of the people that our organization serves, but most importantly, the faces of many other people around the country who struggle with an issue called poverty. It was heavy. And many days I felt as if I wanted to stop. But then it dawned on me, how many people who wake up poor each and every day of their lives and they want to quit. They want to start marching. They want to stop moving forward. And then along the way, I would meet these beautiful people like Albert, who would share the story of him being disabled and living on a disability check, but not even being able to be financially stable enough to afford housing. But yet, in the same breath, I would walk past more abandoned buildings. Did you know I walked through 5 states, including Georgia, and I counted over 1,060 abandoned buildings? And I go, what are we doing with the excess that we have in our country? What are we doing? And then I would meet Brian, who would tell me he has to literally break into abandoned houses and homes just to find somewhere to sleep. And when he does ask for help, when he's genuinely concerned about trying to take a step forward with his life, he says, when I'm on the side of the street and I ask for help, I get people throwing beer cans at me. What do you do when you want to quit? But then I kept thinking and I kept walking and I would see more abandoned buildings and more abandoned buildings. And the story ends in front of the White House, obviously. My friend Johnny, who made the trek with me. And yeah, I did get a chance to speak at the Martin Luther King Memorial. And yeah, over 8 million people heard about this story digitally, but it left me with a question that I took back to my home city, which is Atlanta. What are we doing with our excess? And I would ask my friends and our volunteers, and this one volunteer who is a guy, he says, man, I have extra wood at my house, and I just, my heart breaks with the stories that you've told to me, and I want to build something. I said, cool. And he built this mobile tiny home. It was a tiny home where homeless people could literally take this mobile home and move it because it had wheels on it, so they would have somewhere to stay other than a sidewalk whenever they didn't make it to a shelter by 7 p.m. And then I met this guy named Ronald asking the same question when I got back. He was sitting under a tree, and I asked him, what are you missing? He says, honestly, man, I'm missing a night's worth of rest. You don't know how hard it is to have to go and sleep in the shelter and literally stay up all night because I'm scared that someone may steal my bag, which everything I own is in it. He says, so I don't even go to shelters now because I'm afraid that I'll lose my social security card or my identification or my birth certificate. And if I lose those, guess what? Sometimes I feel like I'm not even a citizen. Because without them, there's no bank account, no credit, no access to a job. There's nowhere to live. So I ask him, I say, man, what do you need? He says, I need rest and I need technology. Thinking about Ronald and what these volunteers just built, I introduced him to this space. I said, man, would you like to stop sleeping under a tree and get off the ground and at least stay somewhere that's warm and dry? And he says, yes. And I said, if you do that, we'll get you technology and we'll give you an opportunity to get your birth certificate again that you lost and your social security card. And we start marrying rest with technology. And then we soon discovered that Ronald had not been in contact with his family in over 31 years. Can you imagine being homeless and losing all contact because you're ostracized, marginalized, and looked over, and you don't have access to rest or technology? So we did the best thing that we knew how. We started telling this story, and a volunteer said, you know what, I'll do research with this technology, and we're going to find this family. Do you know that his sister that he hadn't talked to in over 31 years started following our organization's Facebook page, heard about his story, and they were able to unite? I go, Ron, why are you so open? He says, because most times, man, people turn their backs to me. And it means so much more when nobody turns their back to me and they notice me. So I want to ask you guys a question today. If you had excess, what would you do with it? See, this couple heard this story, and they heard the story about the walk, and then they heard the story about Ronald getting off of the streets and reuniting with their family. And they say, you know what? We have excess. We bought this brand new RV that we're doing nothing with. We bought it in 2014. It sat in the yard. We thought we would go and take some trips, but guess what? We never used it. And so they donated it to our organization. They donated it because people like Ron sleep under trees on mattresses like this. They donated it because many of the people that I met along the way that's suffering with poverty, all the way from Atlanta, Georgia to the White House, have nowhere to stay, but we have access that we're doing nothing with. So marrying the two, we thought, how cool would it be to create Atlanta's first mobile shelter? And we would call it Mobile Stay, a refuge from sleepless nights. Because sometimes homeless people, all they want is a little bit of rest. And you marry rest with technology and a community, and then you have this community that crowd loves a person back to stability. And that's what we're doing. And then I started talking to my board and some volunteers, and I was like, man, what if we partnered with churches? Because churches don't do anything with their parking lots all throughout the week. It's empty. What if we partnered with businesses? What if we partnered with people who had excess and we literally converted this RV into Atlanta's first mobile shelter, and this is what it currently looks like. It's called Mobile Stay. We've yet to launch it. Why am I sharing this? Because in August we will. In August, we're going to say no more turning your back to those who are homeless that can't make it to a shelter by 7 o'clock. No more turning your back to the homeless when you have excess that you're doing nothing with. We want this mobile shelter to create a community for those who are experiencing isolation on the streets. We want to grow people. We want to build bridges between those who are vulnerable and those who have resources. We want to create access to technology. We want to create a safe space for people to share their concerns and cares. We want to provide a safe space for families. So when we think about it, are we really using our imagination to the best of our abilities when it comes to vacant spaces? Lena, who I met in South Carolina, will say no. She says so very few resources there that she has to sleep in the tents in woods, and she doesn't even know sometimes how she'll get clean. And I would challenge all of us that when we think about quitting, we need to think about the faces of the people that can be impacted if we persevere. CR would say no. He would say, man, I've been in Clemson and Seneca, South Carolina, walking back and forth, and you guys were the first people in months to stop and notice me. Why am I sharing all of this? Because we have a vision to hopefully use this opportunity to cast a greater message, not only for our city, but cities across the country, that we can reimagine and repurpose vacant spaces. What could we do if we took an abandoned building and really repurposed it to revitalize a community instead of gentrifying it? What could we really do if we took an old RV and gave people access to a place to stay, crowd love the person, put technology in there, and also leverage the technology to let people know that their loved one who they haven't been in contact with for years visited? What could we do if we rethought how we use our excess? So I need help thinking about, how do we treat our guests when they stay? How long would they stay? What technology needs to be on this vehicle to make reunification happen between lost family members and those who are looking? What do we need to do in terms of possibly securing the land and putting many of these on to create a village or a community? How do we franchise mobile stay and empower other people in other cities to take this concept and replicate it around the country without our brand on it? It doesn't matter. How do we plan to do this? So we just produced a film. It's a documentary called Voiceless. We are planning to launch it in August. We've been asked by the Center for Civil and Human Rights Museum to screen it there first, to get this message out. It documents all of the people that I met along the way from Atlanta, Georgia, all the way to the White House. They tell the story of this film, and we want to leverage this film as a way of casting vision to get a bigger facility and possibly more RVs so we can house more people and get people off the streets. There's a lot more to our organization that you'll find if you're working with us, but our main goal is to leverage technology and the art of storytelling in such a way that we move people to do something about the societal needs that exist in the world. Thank you.